Jeff McNeil injured. The Mets announced their opening day starter. And what's going on with Brandon Nimmo? All of that and more on today's edition of the Bleav in Mets podcast. Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here to send you into the weekend with all of the latest on the New York Mets as spring training comes to a close. And we're sharing all our thoughts on everything going on in Mets land. Jack, how are you, my friend, on this Friday?
Chris, I seem to have jinxed the New York Mets, or maybe we have as a podcast, because we said a few episodes ago, no news is good news out of Mets camp. And I think each episode we've recorded since then, there has been bad news related to player injuries. Although getting the news about the opening day starter was fascinating, and I'm very excited to get to talk about that with you, including in our video format of the podcast, which anyone can tune into on YouTube at Jack McKessie. Just search up my name, McKessy. And we have every single episode of this podcast recorded in video form over on YouTube as well, if you prefer to get your podcast in that form. So subscribe, leave a comment, and we will respond to every piece of feedback we get.
And if you would prefer, head on over to BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for all betting on the madness, whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor. BetOnline, your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to, how about this, a $200,000 bracket contest. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered. Odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Jack, what do we start with? Do we start with our new opening day starter that was announced today? Do we start with the fact that there's going to be a different opening day starting second baseman for this team and perhaps a new face at DH for this team on opening day? I mean, a lot to unpack here on the show. Where would you like to start?
I think we have to start with the perfect segue from our last episode, which is the new hashtag Our Ace of this podcast. Clay Holmes is the 2025 Mets opening day starter. And if you told me that in a week ago, or certainly in November, I would have laughed in your face. But as things stand right now, Mets manager Carlos Mendoza announced today, Friday, March 14th, that Clay Holmes will be taking the ball in Houston to open the season for the Mets. And he said that he earned it. Everything he's seen from him so far looks promising in his transition from a not only member of the bullpen, but a closer who had gone through a ton of work and outings in October with the Yankees, is going to start as the ace of the Mets, essentially, on opening day.
I will take it a step further. If you would have told me on October 21st, 2024, the day after the Mets were eliminated from the playoffs by the Los Angeles Dodgers, that, hey, the start of next year, Clay Holmes is going to be your opening day starter, I'm not sure what I would have done with that information if you had it and you handed it to me.
I would have been livid, I think. I would have been beside myself. This is the best the Mets did?
I think I would have been particularly upset to see that Clay Holmes was the opening day starter, but that tells you the journey that this team has been on. And I've seen a lot of people point this out, and I think it's fair to bring it to the table now. Kodai Senga lines up to start the first game at home, right? The home opener lines up to be a Kodai Senga start if they wanted that to be the case. And at the end of the day, the opening day starter, unless you have a bona fide, solid number one ace, top five pitcher in the game, it doesn't really matter, right? It becomes a footnote. And the Mets, they want Kodai Senga to be that, but he's coming off of a major injury. So we don't know necessarily if they have that in Kodai Senga. And so, yeah, you pick the best matchup, you pick who lines up to pitch that day. And let's talk about, I think, the most important thing here, and that is Clay Holmes has pitched awesome throughout spring. Clay Holmes has pitched well enough that he deserves this opportunity. Andy Martino quote tweeted the announcement from the Mets that he was starting opening day and said, I watched two of his starts from the stands. The stuff is elite. He didn't say good. He didn't say great. He didn't say awesome. He said the stuff is elite. And so this shows you the confidence that the Mets have in what we've seen from Clay Holmes this spring. They don't think this is just a mirage. They don't think this is just a small sample size where he is looking really good. They think there are meaningful, impactful changes that he has made to his arsenal that is going to correctly equipped him to be a starter for this baseball team. And, we talked about what his innings are going to look like. We talked about how many starts are realistic. I mean, I think it all goes away Clay Holmes is just a member of the rotation. We don't need to talk about him being a former closer. We don't need to talk about that transition. The Mets clearly view him as, we're going to forget the past. He's a starting pitcher for us. He's a member of our rotation. Every fifth or sixth day he's taking the ball. The governor's off. We have no concerns about what he's going to be. And so that's really exciting. It's a tip of the cap to Jeremy Hefner in the pitching lab for the work that they've put together. It's a tip of the cap to Clay Holmes for the work that he has done to get ready for this. Added 3 pitches this offseason for this. Carlos Mendoza, joked that when he told Clay Holmes the news, he was just even keeled like he always is, just kind of was, just didn't react too highly, that never gets too low, is just very even keel, just stays calm. And that's kind of what you want from your opening day starter, to take the ball in that spot. So shout out to Clay Holmes, the work that he has put together. It does scare me just like a brief little bit that we're taking a guy who was a closer, 3 months ago and now making him our opening day starter. But how do you not trust this entire process that the Mets have put together? And so I was already excited for opening day, already excited to see Juan Soto, who hit a home run right before we pressed the record button in spring. I'm already excited to see all these things. And now there's just that little extra juice of, now we're going to get to see Clay Holmes. There's no waiting. It's opening day. Boom. We're going to get to see it right away. That's really cool.
I think I'm also with you that I'm a little bit scared about what this is going to look like. And obviously the results in spring so far speak for themselves. To recap, he's thrown 9 2/3 innings, given up 2 hits, 4 walks, 13 strikeouts, and 0 runs earned or not earned allowed in those 9 2/3 innings. That's exactly what you want to see. But going into the regular season and opening day, this is already shaping up to be a second straight year of a major success story with the Mets pitching development team, with Jeremy Hefner, with David Stearns, and the vision that they have for the rotation. We bring it up every time, or at least I do, but last season, the expectations for Sean Manaea and Luis Severino were very low. They obviously came out and performed very well.
Okay. All right. Can I stop you there? I have a question for you.
Sure.
Are the expectations higher for Clay Holmes this season than we had for expectations for Sean Manaea and Luis Severino last year? Like,
yes.
It's the same thing. The Mets are doing the same thing, but because of the great spring from Clay Holmes, plus the past success stories of Manaea and Sevy, I think the expectations on Clay Holmes are incredibly large compared to the expectations that were on those two guys last year. They came in low pressure, prove it kind of deals. For Clay Holmes, they signed him to a 3-year deal. They're making him the opening day starter. Like that pressure is so much bigger than it was last year.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. The expectation for Holmes is bigger, not just because of the opening day thing, but just the context of, we know what the Mets pitching development lab can do with guys that are transitioning back from a reliever to a starter, like they did with Sean Manaea last year. So the expectation is, if the Mets are able to do that with a guy like Sean Manaea, Clay Holmes should be able to have similar success, and to then also put on the opening day mantle, I guess, for him as a starter is going to be massive. And another thing I want to point out here is this isn't just a decision being made about the process, or the results rather, because obviously the results are there and everything has looked really good in spring, but there is also a bunch of analytical stuff that we're not seeing, the behind the scenes, under the hood stuff that the Mets
drives them to this.
In their internal process.
That makes them feel like it's not just it's small sample size. He's just showing these results. There's something that's happening on the backfields behind the scenes in the data that they're collecting that says, this worked. Like this is exactly what we wanted it to be. Yeah, you're 100% right that there is this sort of confirmation behind the scenes that to me dwarfs the on the field results. Like the fact that they made this move tells me that they're more confident in Clay Holmes than that goes beyond just the statistics of spring. That they feel a lot better about this because they're seeing something else in the data that they're pulling together. Yeah, so gets me really jacked up for opening day and excited to see. He has to be at this point. He has to be hashtag our ace. I mean, he's starting opening day. There's no Sean Manaea. He has to take the mantle. On Fangraphs, he's listed SP1 Clay Holmes. I mean, he is hashtag our ace until Sean Manaea returns. I'm sorry, Sean, we love you. This will forever be a pro Sean Manaea podcast. You are hashtag our ace. But somebody has to take up the mantle while you're gone. It's got to be Clay Holmes. It just has to be.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Unfortunately, one player that the Mets are not going to have when Clay Holmes makes that start on opening day, and that is Jeff McNeil, dealing with Bleav it is a left oblique strain. I know it's an oblique strain. I Bleav it is on the left side. It doesn't matter. It's an oblique strain. He's going to miss opening day. And I think for David Stearns, this is the perfect opportunity to see a lot of Brett Beatty and to see a lot of Luis Angel Acuna. I want to talk about that first, and then I want to talk about a concern that I have here for Jeff McNeil. And there are worse contingency plans. We talked about Francisco Alvarez getting hurt and there not really being a great backup plan. The Mets actually have a decent backup plan for Jeff McNeil to go down because they have two young players in Brett Baty and Luis Angel Acuna. You sent me a bunch of tweets last night of Brett Baty playing second base in a spring game. Balls just get hit into him all over the place. Like he was just making play after play after play. I think it's going to be a platoon situation. I think Baty's going to play against the righties. I think Acuna is going to play against the lefties. I think he'll come in for defense late. He'll come in for speed late. I think that's just the way they're going to deploy these guys. What Acuna did in the postseason is exactly going to be his role on this team, plus playing when they play a lefty throughout the year. But I'll give you the floor to share your thoughts on Jeff McNeil gone and what the replacement plan might be.
It just goes back to the many changing expectations that we have to keep in mind throughout spring training, because we were so caught up when we were making our roster predictions about which of Luis Angel Acuna or Brett Baty was going to make the roster. And now it seems very clear that
I'd like to fix my roster prediction. They're both going to make the opening day roster for the 2025 New York Mets. They both will be on there.
Yeah, exactly. So they're both the spot is now wide open for both of them. McNeil is not going to be ready for what was it, 4 weeks ish?
Yeah, it's like 4 to 6 weeks, month. I think is what they think. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously I agree with you, Chris, that I think there's a potential for a platoon situation here. I almost wonder if they're just going to roll more heavily with Acuna on a more day-to-day basis because of the lack of reps that he's gotten at the major league level so far, just to get him in more of a rhythm, because obviously they saw a bit of what happened in the last 2 or 3 years with Mark Vientos coming up and not being as consistent when he's not playing every day. So I wonder if they are going to want to take the lessons from that and apply it to the second base situation and just kind of stick with one of them. Obviously, it is possible that the platoon allows for that because, maybe the Mets are facing more righties, and so that means more time for Brett Baty to get in the lineup. But I just wonder if it's not going to be a full platoon or if it's just going to be, we're going to stick with this guy for now, see how they perform for like the entire time McNeil is out, and then that's kind of the trial run for that player, and then maybe they get sent down when McNeil is back and healthy. So I don't know. It's unfortunate. We saw some good stuff from McNeil in kind of the power that he's starting to showcase the back half of last year and some spring training outings so far, but big chance for Acuna and for Baty to show that they're going to be contributing members of the 2025 roster.
Yeah, just probability-wise, you're going to face more righties than you are lefties. So I think Baty, if we were doing it strictly, Baty plays against righties, Acuna plays against lefties. I think Baty is going to get more of the playing time. So that'll be a really interesting thing to see how they deploy these two guys in the early going. So that's one thing you just file away and you see how Carlos Mendoza chooses to treat it. One thing I will say that concerns me about this on the McNeil front is he didn't have a good year last year. He struggled, right? Yeah. That first half was not very good. He got hurt, and then he came back, and it was better, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. It wasn't great, but it was at least better than where he was at the start of the season. And I just worry that now his rhythm's thrown off. He has to be away from the team for a little bit. He's not doing any baseball activities, right? He's got to take it slow. And then I just worry about, since he's not going to be there on opening day, now he's got to get right into the flow of action. Does he have another slow start? And then we're going to play the game of, he's off to the slow start because of the injury. He's off to the slow start because he didn't have a full spring training. And then all of a sudden we look up and it's June and July, and Jeff McNeil's hitting 212, 215, 225, and we're having the same conversation that we're having last year. And it's only going to get further reinforced if Baty or Acuna, somebody runs with this thing while McNeil is out. It's going to be really hard if you put McNeil back in there and he struggles because he's just getting off to a slow start because he's coming back from the injury. Those calls to bring back Baty, to bring back Acuna, if one of them is hot, those calls are going to get really, really loud. Again, it's not like McNeil's coming off a year where he won a batting title, and so you just insert that guy back in the lineup. Everybody was kind of already looking for the exit ramp there anyway. And so this might open the door for, if Brett Baty plays solid defense and what he's showing in spring plays out to where he's pulling the ball more, he's pulling it in the air, and he's hitting for more pop, the Mets might have it's a good problem to have, but the Mets might have a problem on their hands.
Yeah, I think the other part of the equation to consider is, even if McNeil is healthy, quote unquote, and is back, the problem with injuries to your oblique as a hitter is being able to trust that consistently. So for a guy like McNeil, who we have seen actual empirical evidence is trying to raise his power as opposed to his contact. Obviously, he won the batting title, but with the change in the rules that don't allow a shift anymore, that average has come significantly down over the last couple of years. And so last year and then spring so far, as I've said, we've seen him try to transition to more of a power hitter and get some more pop. But if his oblique is hurt and he's recovered from it, he's still going to have trouble trusting that he can get the same kind of torque. Because as a hitter, obviously in your oblique, you're twisting every time you're swinging the bat, and not being able to generate the same kind of power because you don't trust your oblique, even if it is scientifically, physiologically healthy, is going to be a problem for him, I think, when he comes back. And so to further emphasize your point, Chris, and the point we've been making, this is a tryout for Luis Angel Acuna and for Brett Baty. This is their opportunity to, if they get hot, we have seen the evidence of David Stearns and Mendoza making a decision based on who has earned the job more. And even if McNeil comes back, if Baty or Acuna have played out of their minds, they are not going to switch to McNeil again just because he's the veteran guy. They're going to stick with the hotter hand. We saw it last year after they sent Brett Baty to the minor leagues and brought up Mark Vientos. Mark Vientos never gave that job up. He won that tryout. He is the Mets opening day third baseman, and he will be the third baseman until he proves that he can't do it anymore. So I think for the first month of the season, if Acuna or Baty or both of them step up, I don't know. The Mets will do something to move on from McNeil. I am predicting that right now.
Here's the other thing that I will say. We can talk about the problem that they might have, and I'm the one that brought it up when Jeff comes back. If one of those other guys is playing really well, McNeil's outfield flexibility might help him in the case of, let's say somebody in the outfield is down for a little bit, and now you bring McNeil back. Injuries are going to happen. You're never going to have all 26 guys healthy from the start of the year all the way to the end of the year. I mean, we're already dealing with that. The Mets are not going to have Shamanai on opening day. They're not going to have Jeff McNeil on opening day. They're not going to have Frankie Montas on opening day. They aren't going to have Francisco Alvarez on opening day. I mean, I don't have to go through the list of guys they're not going to have on opening day. These things happen. And so McNeil could come back, be ready to go. Baty could be lighting it on fire. And then all of a sudden, maybe Brandon Nimmo's down. We're going to talk about him in a second. He's down for a little bit. Now you stick Jeff out into one of the corner spots. So you just never know how these things are going to play out. You deal with it once Jeff comes back and you figure it out from there. But could be an interesting thing if one of these guys, Acuna or Baty, takes the reins in his absence. We'll talk about Brandon Nimmo. Made an interesting comment that has all sorts of roster implications when he said it, that he's not sure if he's going to be able to play the field on opening day, and so he might DH. And I have the Fangraphs projected go-to starting lineup, and I'm looking at this, and if he's going to DH, where are you putting Jesse Winker? Who's playing the outfield? Lots of questions here. And so, Carlos Mendoza, what do you got for us? What kind of lineup are you going to be able to put together? I just don't know what happens, right? You said in the pre-show, Siri probably plays center. You put Tyrone Taylor in the corner spot, put him in left field. Then you're basically taking Jesse Winker, one of your best offensive players, completely out of the lineup. Do you stick him in the outfield and sacrifice the defense to have his bat in the lineup? Just a weird situation while they deal with this Brandon Nimmo knee thing right now that he is going through.
Yeah, I think this could be a situation as well where you might see kind of a platoon situation, because Tyrone Taylor obviously is the better defender between him and Jesse Winker. So, you could envision a world where maybe Jesse Winker is the platoon left fielder against a right-handed pitcher. Tyrone Taylor is the platoon left fielder against a right-handed pitcher. And they kind of trade off. Taylor comes in late in game as the defensive replacement if need be. The good news is we've seen Jesse Winker make some defensive plays against the Mets in left field, including his sliding grab to end a game a few years ago with the Reds when he infamously waved to the fans at Citi Field. So, I think there are solutions. I think the Mets fortunately have a decent amount of depth in outfield spots. We were also talking about, what happens to Starling Marte if the DH spot is taken, and what happens with Juan Soto. Like, do you move Soto to left field and put Marte in right, or vice versa? They have a bunch of different combinations and permutations that I'm sure they're going to be considering. If Brandon Nimmo is not healthy, again, he said he's about 80% right now. So there's still a chance that he's available for opening day. As a fielder, regardless, it looks like he's going to make the lineup in one way or another, and the Mets are just going to have to figure out, until that knee is 100% or as close to it as he can be, what they're going to do. And again, they luckily have several options with fielding and to keep some pop in the lineup if they want to.
Yeah, I'd rather have Brandon Nimmo in the lineup than not in the lineup. It just creates a little awkwardness of how they use the rest of their guys, right? How do they want to configure their outfield? And normally they like to keep the DH spot kind of open to rotate guys through, right? They brought Winker in to be their DH against righties, but against lefties, I think they kind of want to use it to rotate guys around. And if you're basically landlocking Brandon Nimmo to that DH spot for a little bit while he deals with his knee, you're not giving yourself a lot of wiggle room because Nimmo's going to play against everybody. He's not going to sit against lefties. He'll be in there. And so it just creates some challenges for Carlos Mendoza, not challenges that I think he's going to fail with. It's just some unique things that he's going to be presented with at the start of the season, just like he's dealing with not having a starting catcher, not having a starting second baseman, not having the guy that, let's face it, Shulman I probably would have been the opening day starter if he was healthy for this team. So dealing with just a whole host of things. You can just add this to the list, but you have to believe in the confidence that these two guys bring to the table, that being David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza, to make the right decisions here and put the best roster on the field when it comes to opening day. I think that's it. That's all that we have for you here leading into the weekend. Juan Soto hit a home run in the spring training game that is going on as we speak. I think we mentioned that already, but just want to mention it again for those of you who maybe didn't catch it the first time. But yes, Juan Soto doing cool things in spring training. His live OPS watch, I Bleav, was 1.503 in spring so far. So Juan Soto, as advertised, it's not bad. As advertised here in the early going of spring. But that's going to do it for us here on this edition of the Bleav in Mets podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As Jack mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to catch the video version, you want to see the show, interact with the show in the YouTube comments, just search Jack McKessy, McKessy. Wherever or on YouTube, you search that up, boom, all the episodes are there for you to catch up on the video version of the show. But hope everybody has a great weekend. We're back on Monday talking everything Mets. Talk to you all then. And as always, let's go Mets.
I can't believe Juan Soto has hit 4 home runs in 22 at-bats. Let's go Mets.